What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Big Blue in the Bronx channel. Yes, this is a Yankees Giants channel, but for the first time ever, we're going to do some Mets talk on here as we are at the halfway point of the 2023 MLB season. We're going to be talking some Mets. I am joined greatly by Professor Angry John at the bottom, and I'm joined to my right by Dan Behan of NYGiantsRush. Fellas, it's been an interesting season for the New York Mets. I'm not sure that's a good connotation, but I'm going to start with Dan and then I'm going to start with John. Give one word to describe this New York Mets team and then give your first thoughts on what this New York Mets team has done in the first half as they stand at 42 and 48 in the NL East. Dan, you muted?
Sorry about that. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I thought I had it off. Yeah, one word I'm gonna cherry pick and say obviously disappointing. Obviously, with being the highest payroll team, you obviously hope for the best, and obviously not necessarily that's always the case. And of course, it's the Mets proving everybody wrong with that. But I mean, for the second half, I would have to say just keep fighting. There's not they're in such a big hole that it's like, all right, they're gonna have to play this string of games out. It's not you can't quit the season now. So it's really gonna be interesting how they do in the next final weeks. Are they gonna make a trade at the deadline, or are they gonna give away pieces that they aren't gonna need in the future in terms of veteran players that we'll get to later on?
Right. Angry John, we know we've done some Mets streams together, whether I don't know what the record is when we've done these Mets games, but we've obviously all seen your dissatisfaction and we kind of agree with it. John, full on first thoughts and obviously one word to describe the Mets.
Well, first off, thank you for joining, Dan. We do appreciate you coming on and joining us tonight. And also thanks to everyone in the chat that joins us. So remember to hit the like, share, and subscribe button if you guys can. And yes, to back up Luca's claim that you guys have seen me watch the Mets games. You guys have joined us for all the streams, and I just can't even describe to say they are mid. That's the one word I'm using, mid, because they were just a little above average the first 2 months, and then the so-called June swoon just tore them apart. They went 7-19 in June, which is just, that's just inexcusable. You can't even, that's in my opinion, that's fireable to managers, to upper management, to go 7-19 at a professional league level. I was just disgusted, and I understand they had a little bit of a run before this weekend series against the Padres, but it didn't even excite me.
Right.
I had no excitement. Okay.
Yeah. I'm yeah, they're finally playing well, but other than that, it's all right. Then you look at I try not to look at the standings because it's so far away, and then all right, we have a 5-game winning streak. Let's see how bad it is, and I'm all right, it was as bad as I thought it was, so I'm not getting too excited.
Of course. And John, any more of your final thoughts?
Just to put those standings in perspective for anyone that doesn't know, division. They're not even going to come close to this. They are 18.5 back.
Yeah,
the wild card.
Finished.
They are 7 back.
Right. Oh yeah, that's right. They lost yesterday. So yeah.
So this is hard. They're just hard.
Yeah, everybody's taking the Frank the Tank feeble comments. Yeah, it's pretty.
Yes.
Yeah. No. Yeah. We've adopted that on this channel for sure.
We've got memes for Dominic the Donkey and all, but in all, as John brought up, the Mets were 7-19 in June, which was probably, I think, the worst in MLB. Obviously, Dan just brought up 42 and 48, 7 games back of the wild card, 18.5 games back of the division, which is probably impossible to catch. It would have to be a historic collapse from the Atlanta Braves, but it doesn't seem like it's going to happen. I just want to bring a thing up as we just referenced the month of June, which obviously brought down a Mets huge collapse. They dug a big hole. So I hate to bring up the past pain, but I feel like it's relevant here. Let's look at some bad months in the history of the Mets, which I've seen in this Athletic article. Give me 1 second here as I got to reload the page. We've got 1963. We We've got the September of 2007, I was reading. It was August of 2019, I think. But there was just a whole lot of bad months. It's been so bad. Like, I'm going to ask Dan first. Was June of 2023 the worst month that you've ever seen the Mets play?
Obviously you mentioned 07, so I'm gonna go 07 because it was just like last year September. It was just like we were coasting along the whole season, and then obviously we made that huge giant collapse, and it was before obviously the 2 wild card teams, so we couldn't even make a wild card in that situation in 07. So I'm gonna go 07 because the 06, 07, and 08 teams were just that they were just that missing piece away from making the World Series. Obviously, we know with the Beltran strikeout. So the 07 team was very close to my heart. So I'm going to go 07.
John, was that the worst month that you've seen? Obviously, you're a lot younger than Dan.
Surprisingly, I'm going to say no. The 07 argument's pretty good, but I think I've just seen like, I'm not even talking about a month. You know, I've seen some really bad stretches even worse than this. So it's like I'm kind of used to it. Like I remember like, you know, the Jerry Manuel into Terry Collin days where it was like there were some really dog days like where it was just like you can't even watch these guys. I mean,
the Bernie Madoff days, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So those exact months, I got all the months now. The exact months I was referencing. Let's start off with a year after they became the expansion team. Let's start off with July 1963. The Mets were 4-25. They had a run differential of -87.
Well, at least if they're expansion team, at least they're like starting now. At least you can understand.
Right.
Like, they were. You know, yeah, that's true. But start of the month, they were in 9th. Down 16.5, and at the finish of the month, they were down 31 in 10th place. So June 2018, recent history, obviously, 5-21 with a -41 run differential. They started 4th in the division, down 5 games, 3.5 out of the wild card. At the end of the month, they were 5th and down 14.5 in the division, losing about 9.5 games. And they lost about 8 games in the wild card. Obviously, that team did not make the playoffs. That was the first year of Mickey Callaway. August 2002.
Oh, yeah. Okay, now I remember that.
Oh, God, I forgot about him.
He is so bad. Oh, that was the year Edwin Diaz, or was it the year after? When basically blew our season. Sorry.
It was, I think, 2019.
Yeah, 19. That's right.
But I'll say this, Dan. 2018, I remember this solely because and this was obviously just brought up June, but the month earlier, they batted out of the lineup in Cincinnati.
Oh, that game. All right. Yeah. Wilmer Flores. That's right.
What was that against the Cincinnati Reds?
It was against the Reds in Cincinnati.
That was pretty awful.
And then
I think they did it one more other time. Almost got caught for it, but they didn't, if I remember correctly.
Yep. We also got August 2002, 6-21 with a -45 run differential. August of 2021. I think it was the first or second year of Luis Rojas, 9-19 with a -25 run differential. June 2023, which already we referenced, they were second place at the start of the month, down 4 in the division, tied for the second wildcard spot. But now, obviously, at the end of the month, we're obviously in July, 4th, down 18.5 in the division, 10 out of the wild card, similar numbers at that point. And also, as we referenced, September of 2007, where they went 14-14 to come on that epic collapse. So I'm going to start off with Dan with first thoughts. Well, not really first thoughts, but you can go into depth with this, obviously. What do you think has gone wrong for the Mets? Obviously, there's a lot of issues, so don't be afraid to break them down.
We'll be here all night. It just seems like they are not playing that fundamental baseball that they did last year with Buck. And for whatever reason, they're just having brain farts left and right on the field. They're not situational hitting or anything situational awareness has been completely lacking. And it's just for whatever reason, it's not there this year. And it's unexcusable. And then the other thing is pitching depth. For whatever reason, these pitchers aren't going deep into games. And then obviously with our bullpen depth, I'm not going to make it an excuse, but the bullpen depth has been atrocious as well. And you guys could probably have the stats on. I don't have it on in front of me, but when a starter goes past 6 innings, I think our record is like we probably have like 2 or 3 losses the whole entire season. And if our pitching doesn't even sniff 6 innings, it's forget it. We're like the worst team in the league, basically. So between the situational awareness of the offense and fielding, and then the pitching depth and going into late into games, has been a disaster for both aspects of the team.
Professor, what are your top issues with the team all around?
Well, I got 2 names: Billy Epler and Buck Showalter. I mean, that's pretty much the simplest answer I can give. And I'll say I'll start with Epler and how he's built this team.
Terrible.
Well, yeah, no, of course,
Right.
terrible. But I mean, you want to talk whether I have to say, like, so the good offensive pieces that are on this team, they're all pretty much before Epler. Let's start with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so
you're right.
we can't even give him really credit for building this great, or not even a great, like a average to good offense on days, when they show up. But he's made some moves that are a little like, and I'll start. These are more minor because obviously the pitching is much worse than the hitting with this team. I don't know what happened to Starling Marte, but I can't figure it out. I mean, he looks awful in the field now. He can't, some of his at bats. I mean, how many double plays has he now hit into? It's like he doesn't even run it out. So that's number one. Another signing from last year, Mark Canha. I mean, he was good last year. Don't get me wrong, but and he's been better of late. But I mean, this guy's an everyday starter, and the power really isn't there. He's a decent player, but at the same time, it's like that's what we're spending our top dollars on, like decent players, and it's just not smart money management in terms of that. Just paying or overpaying for these, washed players. And when we talk about washed players, this pitching staff, I mean, you mentioned it. They don't go deep in games at all. They've lost, I think it's 12 games when they've scored at least 6 runs, which is embarrassing. Yeah. Okay. I mean, you talk about the only starter that this team can rely on is Kodai Senga, and he's a rookie. And that might be the good pitching move for the future that Epler decided to make. Because I really like the stuff he has. I mean, I was a little shocked he made the All-Star team, but
me too.
Great for him, and I'm happy he's been real. He's had a great rookie season. I can't even complain about him. Sometimes
and this is with. Oh, sorry. Finish your Senga one. Well, I was just going to say with Senga, I was giving Senga basically the first half of the season to get adjusted to America, getting adjusted to everything that the MLB has to offer. Obviously, that's a big adjustment. He actually had a couple of rough starts for whatever reason. It seems like he adjusted on the road as well, which was huge because his splits between home and road were insane. Right. So,
and then we even live streamed that Mets Diamondbacks game where he pitched fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, it was probably the best game I've seen him pitch all season long.
Right. I'm with you.
And he's had some good ones. I mean, he had a game against the Rays where he was really dominant. There was an early start against the Marlins where he shut them down. So it's, great that we got him, but then you look at everyone else. I mean, you know what? Carrasco stinks, but that's not an Epler move. I won't blame him for that. Verlander and Scherzer, that's all Billy Epler.
Right.
And look, at the time, I rooted for it because I'm like, you know what? These 2 guys are all Hall of Famers. They still have stuff in the tank, and now they don't. They simply just. I mean, Scherzer was awful. You mean if you watched the game yesterday, Scherzer just his off-speed stuff, his slider is awful, especially to right-handers.
Since last September, for whatever reason, Scherzer's just been washed awful. Up for whatever. It's just been brutal. So it's like people are making comparisons. I retweeted it as well, and it's the Office meme of Pam saying, "Oh, it's the same exact thing," and it's 2 pictures of Max and Tom Glavine. So I retweeted that today.
No, and you talk about we're not done with pitching because I mean,
Epler
I mean, other than Robertson and Raley, this bullpen is atrocious. And I understand after a certain amount, your arm gets tired. I know these starters haven't gone deep in the games. I understand that point very loud and clear, but I mean, bringing in guys like Jeff Brigham, Dominic Leone, you know, all his guys, by the way. It's not like we're forcing him to go get these guys. You know, bringing back Ottavino, like just like moves, that are going to be bad. And it's just like, they allow it they allow their weaknesses to get the best of them, this team. And it's really shown on the field in some heartbreaking losses. So,
yeah,
sad.
Nothing we're not used to, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, as Mets fans. But regarding the pitching aspect, I was just about to remark on what John was saying about the bullpen and all. I thought they've really, again, from an outsider's perspective, I'm a Yankees fan, obviously, but I thought they really done a poor job with the bullpen because the one thing, obviously, Epler was previously a general manager of the LA Angels, and obviously, his big thing was getting Ohtani and whatnot. But the problem was he'll get that main piece, that main building block, but he can't really build around it. They didn't have pitching in LA.
Mm-hmm.
What was his biggest signing? Dylan Bundy?
Yeah.
And that was his biggest signing in LA. And, I'm just I looked at some of the relievers that the Mets, called up this season and used a lot of. Few names come up like TJ McFarland and Tommy Hunter and Jimmy Yacobonis. I'm going to ask you guys a question, and I'll continue with my point. Do you guys think Buck has like a decent amount of say? Because the three guys I just listed, Hunter, Yacobonis, and McFarland, are all Orioles guys who were there when Buck was there. So is it just like, him being reliant on veterans who have been there and done that?
I mean, I think it's slim pickings right now. Like, if you go to Dominic Leone's stats, it literally seems like every game that I turned on, he's pitching in key situations, and you're just like, well, let's hope and pray he holds on or minimal damage or whatever the situation is. And then Yacobonis was DFA'd, so he hasn't played with the big team in like a month and a half as well. So, So who was the other name you mentioned? Tommy Hunter. It's the same thing. He hasn't been with the big team in at least a month as well. So it's just been an utter disaster, and it's just like ever since the Edwin Diaz injury, everybody got pushed up to a spot where Ottavino and Robertson were supposed to be our middle relief guys, and then you have Raleigh, and then you have Smith in a lesser situation where now you're like, come on, man, like hang in there, man. Like we're just holding on to dear life with him type of situation. And then the sticky stuff in the Yankee game, he didn't even get to play, and then we missed him for 10 days, and it was just an utter disaster.
Yeah, it was nothing short of a disaster, just like Billy Epler's management in the bullpen. But it's like, I mentioned this to John how many thousands of times. I said, you guys operate on a $300 million payroll like the Yankees do, my team. And you guys go out and get bullpen pieces like you're on a $50 million payroll because of all the guys. Like, I'm not saying like you have to spend big money on the bullpen, because a lot of bigger teams like key arms come from their farm system, and I don't really notice a lot of big arms that come from your farm system. Obviously, last year you guys traded Colin Holderman to the Pittsburgh Pirates for Daniel Vogelback, and obviously that has not worked out. So again, just outside of the three guys I mentioned, Nagosic, Leone, like they're all scrap heap guys. It's not it's hard to sign like a free agent, but just like do you think it's the lack of scouting? Do you think it's the lack of prospects from like a previous regime? Like, what do you think the problem is with the pitching depth? Obviously, Epler's hugely responsible for this, but like, is there just nobody in the tank in the minor leagues?
You want to take this, John?
Yeah. Well, first off, the minor leagues. All right. So the top prospects for those who really don't know the Mets farm system too well. Obviously, we got the two kids in AAA, Vientos and Mauricio, who at some point I would like both of them to be called up just to see what they can do in the majors.
For whatever reason, Buck doesn't like Vientos.
Yeah,
for whatever reason.
That's so clear.
Don't worry. Danny Vogelback will get his at-bats. We got to make sure of that. But, those are the top guys in AAA. But then you got other kids coming up, like Parada as a catcher and like high A, I believe. Jet Williams is a shortstop. I think Alex Ramirez is down actually here in Brooklyn. The Brooklyn Cyclones. So, those are some promising kids. None are pitchers, though. Everyone's a position player. So when you talk about the top pitching prospects in our system, whether it's Ziegler, Mike Vassell, you you look at them and like, oh, they're not horrible, but like, they project best as like mid rotation guys. Like, and don't get me wrong, you do need them, but you also need like top end starters. So it's not bad in terms of that, but like when you don't have any front end elite talent, like then it's like, okay. And especially now that you don't really have that much in the big leagues, then it becomes a problem. And Luca, by the way,
Yes.
going on to your bullpen spending with Epler, you know how much the Braves spend percentage-wise on their bullpen? Do either of you know? Because I know the answer.
I honestly don't.
Not off the top of my head.
22%. You know how much the Mets spent?
Obviously more because
less than on their bullpen. Just on bullpen.
Obviously less.
Yeah. 10%.
Other than Diaz.
10%.
I'm sure all that's on Diaz.
Yeah, no, literally, like there's no other big like everyone in this bullpen is just a AAA or a AA call up or just a waiver claim, and there's really no one with the only guy who I've said, you know what, I'll give him a chance because he's like kind of like done some good things so far. Grant Hartwig, who is actually in like we'll talk a little bit about him later, but. Other than that, like every bullpen move has failed. Well, it was last year too. Remember they got Michael Givens at the trade deadline, and
that guy was a dumpster fire.
Oh my god! I mean, he ended up not even pitching and losing games. He was so bad.
Right.
He was so bad.
He was so good. It's like he was also so good with the Cubs, and he just blew up with the Mets. It was just so weird to see. And like, I was a guy last year, obviously as a Yankee fan. I wanted Givens last year as a part of the bullpen, but. Thank God he went to the Mets and just blew up.
And I got to say this too, because I know I've been calling for the firing of our general manager and our manager. Our pitching coach can go out the door too.
I'm shocked he's not getting any flack.
I don't understand it. I mean, you look at guys like Peterson, Miguel regress with this team. I mean,
Drew Smith.
It's mind-boggling. Like, remember, Peterson was a first-round pick.
Yeah,
like he was our first-round pick in like 2018, was it? I don't remember the year.
I think it was 2018.
2018, if I'm not mistaken. And Miguel, he was coming up, and he showed really good life on his fastball when he first came up, And now these guys, it's like they're reclamation projects, and I'm like, anytime they've started this year, I know Miguel's down in AAA now, and Peterson's back up. Peterson's looked better since he's come back up, but it's like, ugh, like
2017, by the way, 2017.
But. I'm starting to think maybe you just move these guys to the bullpen.
Well, we saw that last year, and that failed
Peterson
miserably.
Was terrible.
Well.
I mean, he can't start, but he.
Yeah, it seems like with Peterson, McGill that I've watched this year, it's like either they walk obviously on their bad starts. Obviously, they're not very consistent. Although Peterson, I'd say, is more consistent with bad outings. Peterson and McGill are like. They are either out of control with the walks or they just give up a lot of hits and they're just throwing meatballs down the plate.
Right.
No.
So, that's what it is.
One more thing, I understand, you got to build depth up, but you also got to be able to evaluate your own talent. I mean,
of course.
We let Chris Bassett walk. All right. I mean, I wouldn't say he's worth the money he got, but he's sure as a hell of a lot better than what we have.
But and then, Lugo in the bullpen, but he actually starting for the Padres this year.
Right. Lugo's been a starter, and he's been fine. Like, Trevor Williams is even decent. Like, come on, man. Like, this is like, I mean, we got to be a little bit smart here. Like, what are we doing? We're throwing Carrasco every fifth day out. I know he had a good start last game.
He's had the last couple of good starts, but, but I mean, for whatever reason, he can't get past the first inning. Without giving up a run. And then I jokingly took whoever they were playing the week two starts ago. I'm like, they got to score some runs. And of course I mushed it and they didn't. So I was happy and mad at the same time.
Right. Of course.
So back-to-back starts. He hasn't given up a first inning run.
I'm shocked.
It's pretty funny.
What's our first inning run differential now? Does anyone know that? Cause I know we were down by like 30. I don't know.
Yeah, please take a look. It's actually funny you mentioned that. Sick brag on me, but I do have two sons, and I put one to bed every night while my wife takes care of the other son. And I'm reading to him, and it's around 7:30, so I missed the first part of the game. And like clockwork for like a good 2-week stretch, whenever I looked at the phone and the Mets are already losing like 2-0, 3-0, 1-0, and you're like, oh, I can't even watch the game with having any sort of fun tonight. Great. So
I don't. No one can.
I'm like, all right, this is. I don't even get to watch the first inning and get mad. So that's a good and bad thing. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Tonight.
I'm looking at it like I think obviously this is like 2 months ago. I can't really find like the most
And
recent
that
number,
was
but
the peak. And that was the peak of it.
that's true. It was minus 21 from the first in the first inning, minus 21 run differential. So that was obviously pretty bad and still is. Just get to a couple comments real quick. The Mets strike again says the Mets are going to sell. We'll see about that. We'll obviously come talk about that later in the show, what they're going to do with the deadline, whether they sell, buy, or stand pat. Stand pat would be a terrible option. Angry John is the new voice of Lightning McQueen, says Sunil. What's going on, Sunil? He says Mets won't go 47-25 in the second half. They're toast. I believe John and Dan would agree with you. 2017, the year of the thumbs down Mets fan. That's right.
Yeah.
That fueled a Yankees kind of team chant, I guess you want to call it. Luis Robert and Rosarena in their semifinals bracket, obviously referencing the home run derby, which Pete Alonso is in tonight. We got our Firebuck, Fire Billy Epler shirts also on sale. So, guys, please check them out. If you are a Mets fan, even if you're not even a Mets fan, just support the cause. The Mets have to go 47-25 to win 89, which would be good for a wild card, but I think it's done. Rosarena over Rushman on the other end of the home run derby. We already got to that. John and Danny, who stays out of, I think he means like the trade deadline, D-Rob, Raley, or Ottavino?
Are we getting into this stuff now with the
I mean, it's more like the bullpen. We'll get to the starters, I think, next, and then we'll get to like the inconsistencies of the hitters. But we'll just answer this question real quick. Dan, who do you think stays out of trade deadline negotiations? David Robertson?
I think it would have to be Robertson because obviously who you're going to trust to close games. I know you're probably going to get the most out of him, but you also have to manage a team at the same time. So it's really going to be interesting to see how they wiggle around that tough situation of like, are we just going to have Otto close games out if we are able to get anything for Robertson? So I right now I think Robertson stays.
John, what do you say?
You know what's funny? I could see one of these guys staying, but I could also see them just, saying,
all three of them.
All three of them goodbye. Like, get whatever value you can for them. And I wouldn't blame them. I mean, if we're gonna be a bad team, you might as well lose more games. I mean, I'm not gonna root for meaningless wins. Not that I don't want to see my team win, but it's like I'm not gonna be sitting there watching games while we're like 20 games under 500. So.
Yeah, that's my best Frank could think. That's my
best Frank. When Frank starts to bite his glass.
See, like with Frank the Tank, man, I love him not during baseball season. Like during baseball season, it's just like when we're going good and he does the shtick, I'm like, all right, Frank, we're doing good. And then once we're bad, and he deservingly is able to be Frank, it's like, all right, have at it, Frank. We deserve this.
I have to say he's funny.
Yes, but some nights it's just like, all right, Frank.
But some nights it's like, ugh.
Yeah.
Sunil thought it was funny.
Yeah, definitely. Yep. So we've hit the Mets bullpen on the head. Now we get to the starters. And John, again, we're also going to mesh this in, I guess, with some of the trade deadline talk because I know John and me have discussed, like, could they trade some of the starters, being Verlander and Scherzer? How do you evaluate the starting pitching? You guys already hit Carrasco on the head, and you guys have mentioned that the starters haven't just gone long enough. So how do you evaluate the rest of the starting pitching moving forward if you possibly trade one of them?
Well, first off, you have to consider trading any veteran starter you have. I mean, whether it's Verlander, Max, Cookie, I don't think all of them will get traded, but you're hoping that one of them is dealt, or maybe even two. Because remember, another thing, you do have Quintana coming back, so maybe he's a good piece going into next season. Again, we signed him to a multi-year contract. I think it was a 3-year deal, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But you want to see what he can do. Right. You want to see what he can do. He's a veteran that is supposed to not give up home runs, so that's what you're hoping he can limit because this Mets pitching staff gives up a lot of home runs. And you just need to get whatever value you can for whoever you decide to get rid of. The only guy that I know should be an untouchable is Kodai Senga. Other than that, it's, you know what? Anyone, I would take a call on anyone at least.
It was a
The
2-year
thing
deal.
is, where the Mets are with Cohen is they have no problem eating money, and we've seen that.
Right.
And unfortunately, I think the situation calls on itself is we might have to eat tons of money for Scherzer for us to get any sort of quality prospects to get anything back for Scherzer. So it's really going to be interesting to see, do the Mets want to eat that with Scherzer or just have him be a mid pitcher and just suck it up for another year and a half? So I would see, it will definitely be interesting to see how much money would they have to eat to get rid of a Verlander or a Scherzer. I don't see them giving up Verlander right now because it is one more year. I think both of them are one more year, but I think with the player option with Scherzer, it's easier to get rid of him opposed to Verlander.
I mean, well, Scherzer would be. I mean, for Scherzer's sake, he would be dumb not to take his player option because
right now you're taking it. Obviously, no one's giving him that kind of money.
No, yeah, of course.
I just looked at Verlander's contract. Obviously, he has this series next year, and then 2025 he has a vesting option, which vests with about 140 innings pitched the prior season, and that's about $35 million, and then he would become a free agent in 2026. So obviously, that's a little more tough to get rid of. But obviously, as Dan just referenced, the Mets have no problem eating money, which was interesting because I mean, it's obviously interesting.
That graphic was insane this week. Last
50 million.
Yeah,
50 million in unpaid players. I mean,
and 24 was to Cano.
Right. And if you have an owner that's willing to do that, fine. Like, I can understand it once in a while, but like at the same time, you don't want to take on like all these reclamation projects. I remember, me and Luca talked about an article or multiple reports saying the Mets would be willing to eat bad contracts so we'll get bullpen help. And I'm like,
Corbin, Josh Donaldson being mentioned.
Those are kind of the names I want to definitely avoid because I don't want them getting...
No. The Yankees could have Josh Donaldson.
Trust me, I want him off my team as soon as possible, but I don't see the Mets realistically taking on like a big chunk of contracts at the trade deadline. Obviously, they
really shouldn't.
No, not at all. Armin says, in my opinion, Max and Verlander will be off-season trades. Do you guys see that as a possibility? I know we just referenced the trade deadline, but off-season, could they move off of a starter to, as John and I were talking about in multiple instances, could they target a free agent pitcher, maybe get rid of one of those two? Is that a possibility?
With both situations, we would have to pay regardless, like with the deadline trades. We're going to have to find a way to have that dumb team to not realize how much we're paying them kind of thing, which obviously isn't the case because they are well known, obviously. But like I mentioned for the trade deadline, it would be the same during the off season because they make so much money and they're obviously on their back nine of their careers. So either way, we're going to have to pay to get rid of either of the players. So it's how much of a damage is they're willing to take.
Yep, it was definitely the measured risk and reward with these players, obviously with the signings of Scherzer and Verlander at the time. Armin says Robertson will get the Mets the best pieces back, in my opinion. I definitely agree.
Yeah, I agree with that, even though I said it shouldn't be him, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dan, in the aspect that you would have nobody to close games because you don't have that true reliable relief pitcher. Because I know we obviously just referenced Brooks Raley a little bit ago. Raley would be the second, third most reliable option, but outside of Raley, again, you would have nobody to support you, or just a bunch of fringe guys. Obviously, Ottavino, if he stays, I'm not sure if I see him being moved or not because he's a little on the inconsistent side. And then just as I said, they have all these veteran guys like McFarland and whoever, Drew Smith, who's had a down season. But we're going to shift to the hitting now. Obviously, the Mets have been, just John, addressed it. They've been okay to somewhat decent, but in some games, they've also been pretty inconsistent. Who is the most disappointing hitter in your eyes, Dan, or at least most disappointing hitters? Because I think you can at least name a few.
obviously we can't go on a conversation without saying Vogelback, obviously, for whatever reason, obviously, other than him being a lefty or facing righties most nights. Even though he had a couple of good games last week. Him, Marte, like you mentioned before, John, just whatever reason since his injury towards the end of last year, I think that was the beginning of the end for us. Last year was his injury. Was for whatever reason he can't get his head out of his butt, and then he's either swinging out of his shoes. Remember that one that viral? I forgot who they played, but it was a couple weeks ago. That viral clip of the fan screaming at him, "Don't swing at every pitch."
And he swung.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think it was the Brewers, if
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
Yeah, it was the
you're right.
Brewers. That's right. It was back-to-back
Oh my
game
God,
inning.
man.
Yeah, that was. He had bases loaded both times, and one was a strikeout, and the other was a double play. I remember calling that double play. I was telling my wife, I'm like, here comes that double play. Boom, double play. And just whatever reason, it just seems he seems very off this year. I don't know what vibes are going on with him in the clubhouse or just in general, or he's just over it because we're not playing well. It's something up with that. And then Armin also mentions it as well. Jeff McNeil was our batting champion last year in the NL, and just he's batting 250, 260. And that he seems to be that guy that has every other year, for whatever reason, this is his down year this year. And it's like very frustrating as well. McNeil is batting 253. So it's between those two of like key contributors that are very disappointing. And then you throw in Vogelback. And then we'll get into our favorite guy later. Production stats are there, but batting average and everything else, other than last week, he's back to earth a little bit with Lindor. So, so those
John,
would be my. Sorry,
it's all right. No, those were your hitters. So, John, what would you say is more disappointing for the which hitters were most disappointing so far up to the first half?
I mean, I gotta say it's been Marte. I mean, if I had to choose one, I mean, like Dan mentioned, the McNeil, like I mean, he can't hit. Like if he's not hitting for average, then he's really not a useful player on this team.
right?
He just really isn't. You know, again, Canna, big disappointment.
But Canna, Canna is what he is. So I'm not really that like, all right, like he's in that he is what he is category. And then thankfully for Tommy Pham, we'll get to him later. But thankfully for Tommy Pham, I would put Canna in that category if Tommy Pham wasn't on the team kind of situation. You know what I mean?
True. I mean, don't even get me started with Vogelback. I've heard the excuses for him, his little mental rest. I mean,
your manager said he's working well behind the scenes, John. You gotta
you know what that means. You know what that means for anyone that doesn't know what that means. If you have to talk about, you know, how good someone is for working behind the scenes, it means they're really struggling on the scene. Okay, that's what that means. But I mean, there's been some other hitters that have been like that, like Escobar. I thought was awful, but Marte takes the cake for me. I mean. And I really do think it's the injury. And here's what I want to know, because I think this team has mismanaged a few injuries, you know, whether it was Marte, whether it's even Pete Alonso and his wrist sprain, to allow him to come back after like 8 days. You know, I didn't kill them at first for it, but after seeing how he's performed, it's kind of like, you know, it's a, you know, concern for pause. Like, you know, we're not winning games with him. And now he looks worse before he was hitting.
Oh, he's completely out of whack.
He's out of whack. I didn't really want him in the Derby tonight, but, you know, whatever, I guess, whatever. And it's just like, like how many times why can't Buck just put his foot down and say, like, no, you're not playing. I don't care if you love the game. I understand you have a passion for it, but we need you healthy, you know?
Yeah.
Of course.
And, you know, you go back to Marte, like, you know, I was happy when they didn't let him play in the World Baseball Classic. I was thrilled. I'm like, good, don't let him play. I don't want him hurt.
Yeah, me too.
But, you know, he can't stay healthy. The strikeouts are way up for him. I think especially over the past month, I'd say, And you could just see it, like he's fast on the bases, but it's like he doesn't run
Yeah,
it
he
out anymore.
has how many stolen bases?
He's got like 23,
20,
is it?
23, and got
23,
caught
yeah.
4 times.
Yeah, so he could still steal bases. Not like he's not fast, but you could just see he jogs everything out now. And I'm like, well, if you're not hitting it on the ground and beating it out, you're not giving us the pop in your bat. Like, what are you really doing offensively?
Right.
So I feel he's just I feel the injuries really messed him up, and I just don't know why Buck didn't say, like, we need to really consider this more serious because, now you have this one, you have Pete Alonso, who got hurt. Like, it's just a mess. It really,
and the fact
really
he's
is.
batting .211 really is disappointing as well.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? At least he's still hitting.
Yeah, there's
homers,
an excuse. Yeah, right.
but I just, 211 is not acceptable.
Oh no, it's not. Definitely not. Especially for obviously he's hitting homers. That's great, but you'd like to see the average around the 230s, 240s, in my opinion.
And he's
for someone
usually
of his caliber.
250, 260 guy, 270.
Yeah, that's
Right.
where he should be at. 250, 260, not 211.
Right, of course. Yeah, Marte would have to be my top. As John would know, I wanted him in the offseason as a Yankee fan. The offseason, you guys ended up signing him because he was a hot trade candidate in the 2021 trade deadline. Hit 292 last year. He's if I've watched a decent chunk of Met games this year, he's also kind of cost you guys in the field. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah, there was a couple of questionable plays that were like, why didn't he catch that? We know you're fast enough. /
There was the play I referenced, the play in Philadelphia where he lets, I forgot who was at bat, but he let pretty much, it would have been a base hit, but he allowed it into a triple. That's how bad he's been.
Yeah, it's been a disaster.
Yeah, especially I know Armin mentioned, the muscle core surgery. Could he still be recovering from that?
Possible.
I think that's a huge possibility in my opinion because it's.
But if you're out there every day, unfortunately, you gotta show it to us.
That's true. It's true because I'm just looking at his stat line. He has not hit below 255 or at least 260 since his rookie year in 2012. He's always been like a high 280s, 290s, 300s guy. Speed, he can hit at the top of the lineup. He's obviously, due to his own struggles, he's been moved around the lineup this year. He's not at the top of the lineup anymore. He's more towards the middle. And obviously, Brandon Nimmo has been that top of the leadoff position, which obviously he deserves. But you see, Marte would be like a 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 hitter guy. Now you just don't see that anymore. So I definitely think that's a conversation to have. Dan mentioned Jeff McNeil. Obviously, you just mentioned Dan talking about one season he'll have an excellent season. Last year he had the batting title. Now he's more of a singles hitter and he's hitting 250 something. Now, John brought it up, and obviously this is a part of his offseason plan. Would you possibly think of trading McNeil in the offseason for a starting pitcher, knowing that you have Mauricio on the come up?
It's a possibility. I mean,
yeah, it's definitely there. It's just one of those annoying things. We just invested so much money. Well, not so much money, but
true. You did extend
we invested on him to be that batting champion. And then the minute we trade him, he's a perennial batting champ like Daniel Murphy. So I don't want to get rid of McNeil. For whatever reason, hopefully he gets hot in the second half. I'm knocking on wood, but yeah, I can't trade McNeil. I think our cornerstones are there, and they just got to ride whatever funk they are in out of it. I wish I had a better answer for that, but I'm not getting rid of McNeil. We just invested a lot of money for him.
That's understandable. It could be possibly just a down year, as you were mentioning, with the back and forth seasons. Like DJ LeMahieu had a batting title season. I know it's 2020 was kind of like the COVID season, whatever, but he had a down year in 2021. So fans like myself restored hope in him, saying, this guy's going to come back this year to 2022. As I think it was a toe injury. It impacts his play in 2023. He's even worse. So obviously you guys, I think you guys should still believe in him. I think obviously, you could trade other pieces for a starting pitcher, but McNeil also, I think, in my opinion, has struggled because he's been up and down the order. I think usually a hitter would struggle, if they don't find the rhythm at a certain spot. There's not been a set spot for Jeff McNeil and just some other hitters in the lineup. And I think that's been a problem with the inconsistency of the Mets lineup in general.
And I 100% agree with that, but here's what really drives me nuts. And this is 100% Buck Showalter's fault. Because you just mentioned him moving, whether it's McNeil and Marte down the lineup. Why does Lindor get to hit third every game? I mean, I know he's been better recent, but there was a stretch where he was horrendous out there. His average was in like the 220s, 215s, and I'm like, we're really like rewarding this guy. I mean, I know we give him a big fat contract, but like, and I guess he has to play, but there should have been a time there where Buck said, you know what, you're not playing good, you're getting benched. Like, I would have at one point. I mean, not now.
Or at least move down the order. Like,
I would have moved him down the order.
Either move
he
down
plays
the
every
order
day, so
right. And I understand, he's supposed to play every day. I understand that argument, but you don't have to hit him third if he was playing
I'm with you. I'm with you on that. Like, I wish McNeil or Marte. Well, Marte was our 2-hole hitter last year, and we did damage.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously you can't trust him right now, but
right.
Oh, see, Armin makes a good thing. It is also, I think, the weirdest. No, the other one, that McNeil and Lindor. I think it's also bad juju. I know I'm going into a superstition type of thing, and people don't believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
McNeil and Lindor made a bet with McNeil that if he won a batting title, he would get a car of his choice.
I remember that. I've
and
seen that
who hasn't gotten a car yet? And so McNeil hasn't gotten a car yet, so it's kind of weird and bad vibes type of situation of like.
It's funny.
I'm just making.
It's funny too. No, I'm glad you mentioned that because I wanted to bring up the old comments from his. This is about maybe a month and a half ago, maybe almost 2 months now, where his old teammate from Cleveland, Jason Kistner, basically said, "Hey, you're not a leader." And he said it like, it's not like he hit it. He said it in front of cameras. Like, it's not like he was hiding while he said it. And you get called out, fine. Like, there's really nothing you could do. Here's like where it really stunned me. He said nothing and he allowed his like wife to like defend it. And I'm like, I mean, I'm happy like your family's sticking up for you, but like the fact you don't even say anything, like, to me, that's a problem. That's a lack of leadership. Like, stick up for yourself. Say, I am the leader. Show that you're a leader. And I don't think he is.
I don't think he has to show Kipnis that he's a leader. I think he has to show in the locker room.
No, like, I'm not saying he has to go, start an argument or a fight with Kipnis, but at least, have some self-respect. Stand up there and, prove to us fans that you're worth it. Well, and he hasn't so far.
Right, but I think, and also if he was a leader, even though some would say he's not, a testament would be one of his teammates going up and sticking up for him and saying, you know what, Francisco is a leader. And I don't like what Kipnis said. Like, you don't have to say it directly on Twitter, but you could say, like, if, I just don't like what Kipnis said about my teammate. There's nobody that's really came to bat for Lindor, honestly. I'm not saying he's completely disliked, but I think that's just a little interesting point to just have regarding Lindor. So some other offensive pieces that I think have had down years. John just mentioned Mark Canha, but he is who he is. He's kind of like that kind of solid left fielder, but he's not somebody who you should spend a ton of money on. Obviously, Pete Alonso, I thought I saw Frank the Tank or somebody mention it. He's hitting like 1-something since like the end of April. I'm not mistaken.
Makes sense because he's
maybe high 200s.
Batting 211 right now. So
let me get the breakdown on that because
get the breakdown. But he's batting 211 right now.
Yeah, no,
it's bad. And he's the guy that I want to build. I would love to sign him long term, Pete. So I would have liked the extension this summer, but we'll see what happens with that.
So the average has just been on a downturn since April. April was probably his best month. 268, 336 on base percentage, and a 903 OPS. Really good stats.
That's
9
Pete,
homers, 24
man.
RBIs.
That's Pete.
A lot of extra base hits, just not a lot of hitting, when there needs to be.
Right. May 219, 339 on base percentage, 10 homers, 21 RBIs. June 152 with a 222 on base percentage, 4 homers, 9 RBIs. July thus far, 2 homers, 6 RBIs, and a 143 average with a 333 on base percentage, which I find interesting. And against lefties, 218, righties, 207. So it's not, as Joe Girardi would say, it's not what you want.
All right.
So
it's not.
It's not at all. And I also want to bring up Daniel Vogelback, and John's mentioned this multiple times. It's not even just the average part of him hitting 225; it's the lack of power. He's only hit 5 home runs last year.
Yeah.
In total, last year he hit 18. Obviously, he still can hit 18, but it would have to be a really big second half spark. But outside of Pete, I think you and Francisco Lindor, obviously, I think you guys lack kind of like a third power bat. In my opinion,
we definitely.
That's why I think you guys.
Well,
need to
all right, we haven't talked about him for one second, but yes, go on.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say.
I'm sorry to interrupt, John, but I was gonna say that's why I thought you guys needed Correa, but obviously you don't need him after all. After he's had a really bad start to the season,
I'm actually impressed that we haven't brought him up in 50 minutes.
Good. He's been
no the other Francisco.
Yeah,
Alvarez.
no, Alvarez.
I was actually going to remark, because we're obviously doing the negatives of the lineup. He's going to be on our positives of the lineup.
Right.
And I think
But before we go into Alvarez, and we will get into him, I want you to put this in perspective, because we talked about Marte and his core muscle injury, and that really does affect a player, especially their strength, right?
Of course,
right, of course.
Just put it into perspective. Danny Vogelback and Starling Marte with a core muscle injury have the same amount of homers to this point. And Vogelback's supposed to be a power hitter.
Right.
It's not like Vogelback's this speed demon or this contact hitter or this amazing defensive player. No, what Danny Vogelback is, a power hitter. And he has the same amount of homers as a guy who had a core muscle injury. What does that tell you? Shouldn't that tell you something?
Listen, I guess at least he takes the walks. But again, he's always been known as a power hitter. His career high was 30 with the Seattle Mariners, obviously. But a little midsection here. I want to get to it. So we're going to do our player awards. We have MVP. We have most improved player. We have most disappointing player, the least valuable player, and biggest surprise. So about 5 awards. I'm going to start off with Dan, then John, our MVP for the Mets through the first half.
I'm going Brandon Nimmo. He has his most home runs, obviously, on the first half. He gets on base as always. He's played for the most part, other than recently, he's been playing a Gold Glove center field, which has always been his bugaboo. So I'm going Brandon Nimmo.
John?
You could always count on Brandon.
Nice.
And that's great to see after a big contract extension.
Right. So I chose a hitter and a pitcher for each of these little segments.
Okay.
Nimmo's my hitter as well,
right.
because, as you just mentioned, he gets on base. The power has been better. And up until recent, the defense has been there. But he's also a leader, in my opinion. He always sticks his face in front of the media and says everything. That's a real leader. And then the pitcher has been Kodai Senga. There's been times where he's just unhittable. I think the ghost fork is the most unhittable pitch. Good luck to any hitter trying to hit that. It's hard to pick up.
He needs to hit 33 home runs.
No, I won't even lie. I don't even have the derby on because it's.
Yeah, I have it on just because I have it on every year. But you're right. If he doesn't make it, he doesn't make it.
I'm okay.
Yeah, was he facing off against Julio Rodriguez? I think.
Yeah, Julio, the hometown guy.
Yeah, I'm gonna look at the numbers for the ghost fork, as they call it, for Kodai Senga. His whiff rate is 59.6.
Oh, he has extra time. Oh, good call. All right, so he could get to 40. That'd be fun.
Wow.
But going back to Senga, I think the SNY put it the other day. It was the most whiffed pitch out of all of MLB. 59.6% on the whiff percentage for the forkball, or as people would say, the ghost fork. 126 batting average against. The only pitch that's somewhat hitters can hit is the fastball and the sweeper, but the ghost fork has been obviously his best pitch. Moving to most improved player, I'm gonna start with Dan again.
Obviously, most improved, I would have to go with the rookie, because we never actually saw him in the big leagues doing it. Is Francisco Alvarez, because obviously he already has 14, 15 home runs as a rookie. Managing the pitching staff, I know it's not the perfection, but having to catch Scherzer and Verlander, and then you have talked to other guys, veterans, and he's managing them pretty well. It seems like they all like to pitch to him, so that's huge. So I'm gonna go with him. I'm gonna go with Alvarez.
John.
And he got his average up. He was batting
Yeah.
like 211 a couple weeks ago. Now he's batting like in the 30s, and you're like, for a catcher now, that's phenomenal. So that's obviously more than we ever got with McCann and Travis Nito. So let's see what happens. Whatever he did was better than that. And then Narvaez, that was a very weird signing. Narvaez was a weird signing as well, because they obviously didn't expect him to be calling up if he didn't get hurt. So thankfully Narvaez got hurt. So that was the weirdest part of it all too. So
John, who is your most improved?
Well, for a hitter, actually, Armin hit the nail on the head with his comment. Tommy Pham is my player.
I gave you that one.
Because, I mean, geez, I mean, he was like dreadful to start. But then, I think I read a stat in the month, I think it was June or to a certain point in July. He had like an OPS with like on par with Ohtani.
Yeah, it was like, one
level. Wow, that's like impressive to me. I mean, he raised his average by like 60 points. He hits for extra bases. He steals bags as well. So he'll be valuable for someone at the deadline. And I think he's a really good trade chip. And it's funny, the other guy I also want to mention, Brooks Raley in our bullpen. The only other guy besides David Robertson of some use to this Mets bullpen. The fastball's there. The slider's been pretty good. So, I think those two, and he had a slow start, but I always had like a good spot for him. I think he's a good trade chip. So those are the two guys that I would definitely put for that.
You put up for most improved.
Mm-hmm.
So Sunil says, bye Alonso, home run derby champ dethroned. Was he actually dethroned is the question.
Not yet. He has to go, but he has to hit 42. Yeah, he has to hit 42 homers.
Again,
I don't see that happen.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Sup to G-Man, great show, go Astros. Obviously, Armin said 41, but it's 42 home runs now. So
Pete has to get 42. So
that's right. So what I find interesting, and John brought this up in our previous shows, Pham seems to be the only hitter that hits lefties on your team.
Yeah. No, like our hitting against lefties has been dreadful. It's been, I mean, there was like a certain point in like June where it's like, okay, they were starting to do better. I remember they had that game where they, didn't, I'm trying to remember who was on the hill. I'm drawing a blank, but there was like a few games where they did, and then it's like they're back to where they were. They can't they can't like just get out of their own way against lefties. And it's funny because like we do have plenty of right-handed bats,
right?
But
that's not the problem.
We just can't hit lefties.
Yeah, that I found interesting, obviously, because John's mentioned multiple times. You guys struggled against Wade Miley. What other notable pitchers have you struggled with?
This is just off the top of memory. Luzardo from the Marlins, Miami.
The guy from the Diamondbacks the other night. I forget his name. He had an ERA of like 4.
Snell.
Was it Snell that we struggled against? I can't remember if it was him. Wade Miley pitched a great game against us. Kershaw pitched really great against us. Framber Valdez made us look silly in Houston. I mean, the list went on and on. I mean, there was a time was it Austin Gomber? There was someone in the Rockies that shut us down back in
it was someone in the Rockies. I don't remember the name.
Yeah, I remember he was a lefty. I think it was Austin Gomber, if I'm not mistaken. Or it was it Kyle Freeland. One of those guys killed us, and they shouldn't have. But just like so many lefties have just like destroyed us.
Yeah, the Diamondbacks pitcher I was referencing actually was Tommy Henry, who obviously faced off against Senga in that game.
Yeah, Tommy Henry. Like we could not hit him.
He had an ERA of about 4, and he seemed to just mow through your lines and make it a pitching
almost
duel.
5. We could not hit this man.
It was just so unbelievable. So now, most disappointing player. I'm going to start with Dan once again. If you want, you can name 2, honestly, because I know there's a bunch.
Like we mentioned before, I'm going to have to go Marte and then pitching Scherzer. For the amount of money we're paying him, he's pitching like towards the end of the rotation guy when we need him to be the dominant Max that we know and appreciate. So those would be the two guys. We already talked about Marte, so and we could let up easily on for Vogelback because that's all we do. But with Scherzer, it's like the amount of money we're paying, he can't be breaking down on us, and unfortunately, at his age, he's going to. So that's the bummer part of it. So those are my two guys.
John, most
Well,
disappointing.
If I answered Vogelback, he need a 2-week hiatus because
Right.
So we won't do that. I agree on the Marte thing, but I'm also going to throw another name out there, David Peterson.
There you go.
I think Jeremy Hefner has ruined this kid, and I just I don't see him getting better. Now it's not all his fault, but at the same time, I thought he'd have a step up and take a bigger role, and he had a good spring. I wasn't pleased with him last year. He had a good spring. I was really looking forward to see what he can do, and just it's either can't find the strike zone or it's everything's just getting crushed. And I'm well, that's not really good. It means a pitcher doesn't have great stuff, and it means he can't locate well.
All right, next award, second to last, least valuable player.
All right, for this one, I'm choosing Danny Vogelback.
Yeah, go Vogelback.
Screw that. And there's a certain pitcher on here who Luca loves this song whenever we play it when he comes in the game. It's Mr. Dominic Leone. I mean, just
I think that's also Buck being Buck and just using him to his arm collapses as well.
Yeah.
I know he's not good, but I give a guy a break. He's not good, and then you're just putting him in the worst situations as possible.
Horrible, man. Just
make it stop. Just make it stop.
If you watch our streams, you just see my face when he comes in because
even when he's just warming up, John's no.
Yeah,
no.
for sure.
I don't want him in the game. Stop.
Used to be a good pitcher, but that was obviously years and years ago. How about biggest surprise? I'll let the panel have this one forward. Biggest surprise.
Tommy Pham.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can agree. I can agree on that. I'll even go to say Francisco Alvarez. I didn't expect him to be ready,
right?
And he's I couldn't ask for more from a rookie season so far, or first half of one. Obviously, not everything's perfect, but I'm willing to give him more of a break and a pass, if he makes a mistake or two.
Especially he's a catcher, so it comes with the territory.
Yeah, there's a lot to learn to being a catcher. Also, Grant Hartwig's been pretty solid since he's come up from the bullpen. So maybe you got one player in the bullpen that could be something. I'm not asking for too much, just something decent.
Yeah, definitely. So we're going to move off of that segment, and I know we wanted to get to this. We're going to talk about the bright spots in the first half and hope for the second half. So I thought we'd start off with the young kids, and we've just said it how many times? Francisco Alvarez. Let me just mention a stat here. He's third among rookies in home runs. He has 18 for the season behind Corbin Carroll and Josh Young. Is he emerging as a power bat to support Pete Alonso?
We hope so. We're not going to be getting another guy like that, so he has to be. We haven't talked about him this whole stream. Is the Brett Beatty? I really like him. You can tell he has something. It's just hopefully we get it out of him this season and in the years coming. So you can tell he has it.
John, what do you have to say about the young kids?
Well, let's I don't want to sound negative toward the kids, but it's one of those moments. I don't mean to toot my own horn here, but I called for it back in March and April.
Right.
When they made the decision of the opening day roster. And I'm okay, can someone please explain why Alvarez wasn't up, Beatty wasn't up, or even Vientos? None of them got a shot to play to start off. And some people agree with me. Some people said, oh, well, they need seasoning. They need time. They all killed AAA. And Vientos still has 1,000 OPS in AAA this year. So let's not even say, I don't want to hear the argument, oh, he's really not ready. You see the numbers. No, he's been demolishing AAA pitching. He's ready. And so is Beatty. Beatty was killing it that first month before he got called up. And I can understand the argument if they weren't ready. But then when I saw guys playing over them like Escobar, like Narvaez or Nito, like a Danny Vogelback getting time. I'm what is this argument even? These kids are at least they're learning.
Yeah. Vientos has like 17 home runs in AAA. All of them were wasted in AAA. Where like he had like 15 in the first 2 months, and like we could have used that here in Queens. It's like, what are we doing here?
I know, and I'm not saying that's just because he kills it in AAA means he's going to be like.
No, yeah, of course, but at least
like
we have at least there's like the hope of, okay, he's been doing it now. Let's have him have the big at bats here,
right?
And let him like get it here. You know what I mean?
Right. And my bigger point is like sorry, as a motorcycle passes, I think I've had a motorcycle and a helicopter tonight. So Luca, if you're doing the tracker, but anyway, like you can't give me the argument that they couldn't produce more than the guys I just mentioned. And they still can't. They still have the veterans still haven't outperformed the rookies, and it got me. I think this is probably the angriest moment when Luca told me about this, because I remember he told me, and he knows how much I hate some of the guys on like WFAN or some of these other radio, personalities, and it was Salicata, and he literally said that the rookies should not be playing over the veterans because of the salary.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
And I was like, wait, what? Like, do you not watch this team? The veterans are the reason we're losing. Like, I can understand they were like helping us win, but they were like, we were losing with them. Like, what's the hurt of calling up kids?
Yeah, his excuse was, you guys have a $300 million payroll. You spent the money on like Lindor and all those guys, so you might as well just use them, which makes no sense at all.
Like, what a awful.
And then one of the things he said sarcastically was like, "Oh, next the fans going to be calling on Ron Mauricio to replace Francisco Lindor." I didn't get that. I didn't get that.
The thing with Evan Roberts mentioned it about Mauricio, and I kind of agree with him once he mentioned it. It seems like the Mets don't want to trade him just in case there's that one big trade piece and he's not hitting right away up here, and they're like, "Oh, we don't want him," kind of thing. Which is pretty stupid to even think, because obviously his track record in the minors, and he's obviously a natural guy. So I see what Evan's saying, and I also don't see what Evan's saying at the same time, type of thing. But it could be the Mets. It could be the Mets.
I'm not calling Mauricio to go replace Lindor, but like, you're a young prospect, and you're losing like the Mets have been. You got to see what you have for next year. Right. I mean, what if one of these kids, let's say they call up Vientos and Mauricio for the second half on like Friday. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but let's say one of them has like a terrific second half season. That could be a good piece for next year. You don't know. You don't know what you got. At least give him a shot.
Yeah. So we got Sunil says we got the semifinals. We have Robert versus a Rosarena and Vlad Jr. versus J-Rod. Armin says Salicunta speaking dumb shit. Well, no surprise to anybody on this panel. So we already talked about a little bit about Beatty, but I think he could be better. He obviously started out in April hitting .333. I think he battled an injury and then went on the IL and then got sent back down and called back up. He hit .257 in the month of June, .222 in the month of July, obviously only the first half, but I do think he'll get better. Alvarez, obviously, as Dan mentioned, his batting average is up to .234. I like to see that in .240s, .250s, so it's on an upward trend. Obviously, the power's there. I'm not drawing this as a comparison just because he played for the Mets recently, but Alvarez kind of reminds me of like when Gary Sanchez was a young rising prospect. Like he was a potential rookie of the year candidate when he first came.
He's not like that in the next upcoming years.
Right, of course, when his defense completely flopped and he jogs to first base. But like Alvarez, I didn't get this with some people. I'm not going to lie to you. Like some people were pissed off he did that Pedro Serrano thing when he was rounding the bases in Arizona. Like, don't you want a kid with that kind of gravitas and that animosity to have some fight in the clubhouse? I didn't get like people's outrage over that. I'm like, if you're just complaining about anything at that point. So
I think I agree. I agree with what you're saying, but I think people have been burned so many times that it was like, oh, here we go again. We're going to be tonight's joke on Twitter because we lose on heartbreaking fashion. I think that's really what boils down to more of the people's like anger towards it, unless you're like an older guy that doesn't like entertainment and fun But I think that's the kind of thing of like, all right, he hits that home run. Next inning, we walk the bases loaded and we lose on the final pitch. And then you see him, and every tweet is, oh, when your team loses on a walk-off walk, you're still so. So I could see why people were freaking out about that.
Yeah, it's actually funny because when Alvarez, I think, hit the home run, or when the Mets took the lead off of that Kana triple in the top of the ninth inning against the D-backs, Evan Roberts actually tweeted, "I'm waiting for the eventual collapse that we're going to give up a walk-off in the bottom of the ninth inning." Right. And, John was bracing for it, but luckily, obviously, the Mets came out and won. They swept the Diamondbacks, all of that. So I think Alvarez is an emerging he was a near all-star. It could have been an all-star. I don't think he was, but definitely a contender for Rookie of the Year. I think he's going to have a really promising future.
Doesn't need to work on the defense. He'll get votes for sure.
Oh, yeah, definitely. He'll definitely get some Rookie of the Year votes. Obviously, he'll be facing Josh Young in the American League. No, I'm sorry. My mistake. He'll be facing Corbin Carroll in the National League. My mistake there. Could work on the defense.
He's going to win it.
Yeah.
Carroll's going to win it.
8 errors behind the plate for Francisco Alvarez and 3 pass balls. Obviously, the baseball. I don't use Baseball Savant a lot, but they like his framing a lot. Is he a good framer?
Yeah.
Seems like it.
100% better than Thomas Nido. And it was funny because, the argument was made why Nido should be, and they said last year he was like one of the best at framing, and then they started this year. It's like, well, he's not so good at framing. I'm like, which is it? Like, pick a side, and he's just like that's the one thing I do like about Alvarez, and he's gonna even get better. You have to think because
of course,
he's learning MLB strike zones, and I know some of these umpires have been awful.
Of course,
I mean.
All of them.
all of them. You're right on that. But and I think he'll clean up like some of the defensive work because again, it's being a catcher is not just about like staying behind the plate. You got to like work a pitcher. You got to have a feel for the game, and he's going to learn these things. So it's probably one of the hardest positions in baseball. And remember, he's only 21 years old.
Yeah, he's got a ways to go.
Yeah.
Brett Beatty, as I already highlighted, we already passed him. Where do you guys see Mark Vientos being called up again this year and having like a decent sized role? Because obviously, Dan and John, you mentioned it. It seems like Buck just doesn't like Vientos, and I don't get why. Because I thought like Vientos obviously was raking in AAA and whatnot. He showed some promise, but it seems like Buck was always willing to replace him, and that's probably one of my problems with Buck is like he's too reliant on the veterans. That comes with the bullpen. That comes with the hitting. Like there would be days where Vientos, I don't know, just hits a home run or is 2 for 3 or whatever. Next day, he'd be out of the lineup. It would be easy out Escobar, whoever in the lineup. So that's obviously one of my problems with Buck. But do you see Vientos, whether the Mets decide to sell or whatever direction they go, do you see him being a part of the future and obviously having a substantial role?
As long as the Buck's here, I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm kind of in agreement with that.
Like I'm partially being funny, but I could see Voit coming up here before Vientos and it'd just be like, oh yeah, just to prove my point that I don't like him.
You know what? I'm gonna remember what you just said because
I'm kidding though.
No, but I'm scared Luke Voigt's gonna come up in like a week or two because of a freak injury, and I'm like, wow, he was right.
That would be scary. I mean, you guys already grabbed what's his name, DJ Stewart, off of what was it, waivers or off from the minors.
Yeah, he's up right now.
Like we're telling me that Vientos can't do better than DJ Stewart. Like
that's the insane thing. It's just very frustrating.
It is.
It's so mind-boggling because he's a hitter with such talent. He could play a couple of positions, but
let him platoon with Beatty at third for all I care, or give him time at first or DH. Like I don't care. Just find him at bats. Let him work.
Right. And that's going to be the other reason why Mauricio hasn't been called up yet is because he's a man without a position. But I would move him to second base and have McNeil play in the outfield or someone play in the outfield. Because I know Beatty, they've had Beatty play there.
Yeah, Beatty in left. They've had him in third. Yeah. They've moved a lot of their prospects around. So.
Yeah. So.
I fear for you guys that Vientos, I should say Billy Epler, is taking a page at what I call the Brian Cashman playbook, because obviously he learned under Cashman. It's going to be like this. My fear for you guys, obviously I believe in Vientos. It's going to be like one of those Oswald Peraza or Esteban Florial situations where they're
It's
raking
looking
it.
like it. It's looking like it.
It is, and it's scary because, obviously with the Peraza thing, I'm still begging for the Yankees to call him up. He's raking in AAA, hitting 277 or whatever. He's raking. He's doing all he can defensively and offensively, and he's just not getting the call up when a washed guy in Donaldson sitting in front of him. You guys still have the opportunity to call him up, and you're not doing that. And he's still raking. Same thing with Mauricio. You guys can. It's not hard for you guys to call him up. I don't know who's really sitting behind where he can't be called up. That's the issue.
I mean,
you're right.
You want to try and argue Danny Vogelback? Like, don't even start. Like, I'm saying if Buck really said that, or Billy Epler said that, like, don't even give me that. I won't even accept that as an answer.
I mean, I don't even remember what. Obviously, Buck was not going to say it publicly, but I think the media asked a question about him and Vientos, and I guess Buck just wanted to move off of it, I guess. But
I wonder why.
This is our final segment. Should be kind of brief, kind of not. What would you? Actually, I'll split this into two quick segments. What are your thoughts on Billy Epler and Buck Showalter moving forward, and when do you see them having their asses on the hot seat? I'm gonna start with Dan.
Epler already has his ass on the hot seat. He's obviously doing bad. I'm sure Angry John's gonna get mad at me with Buck. Obviously, for whatever reason, Buck's not having a great year managerial wise. It's honestly with Buck is like, who else are you gonna have manage us? Eric Chavez, I don't see that happening. So I'm sticking with Buck and just running it out with him. And then once he wants to retire, he retires, type of thing.
Even after, let's just see this team doesn't go to the playoffs, you wouldn't fire him after the season, or would you just, or we would keep him past this year?
I would keep him past this one more year, like a half a year, and it's just like, all right, Buck, it's not working out, bud. It's not working out because his track record shows that he's obviously one of the better managers. We're not going to get a better manager out of anybody unless someone comes out of the darkness and whatever. But Buck's not making my argument valid right now, and it's. I know I'm in the minority of that situation, but it's just the facts right now.
Well, I'm in agreement with you and Epler. He's been an awful general manager.
Yeah, he's pretty.
But the reason I'm on the fire Buck train, why I'm on this hype train, I understand.
You're not wrong, and you're not wrong.
I understand that he does know baseball. I'm not saying he doesn't, but my issue is he's become accepting of losing.
That Brave series.
That's where the tipping point was for me.
Right.
Because I understand.
You're 100% right.
I understand teams come very cold, but when he just didn't act like, we just got swept by our division rival, and he said he was proud, I was like,
yeah,
okay.
No, that was just like everybody in the fan base tipping point.
Infuriated. I'm like, are you kidding me?
That wasn't good.
Talking about.
That doesn't help my argument at all, but I know I'm in the minority of that, just strictly because who are we going to get better than Buck? But you're right. Now, that was everybody's tipping point, but who are we going to get? That we're like, oh, my God, that's our next manager? I don't see anybody in the pipeline of being
I feel like the general manager, president of baseball operations market is stronger than the manager market.
That's true. Again, it's a lot of unknowns in the manager market. Obviously, people mentioned Joe Espada. You guys previously interviewed Carlos Beltran before that whole scandal came out.
That disaster.
Yeah,
that wasn't really on us, though.
No, that's not on us. That was just unfortunate. Right. And then Luis was just like he wasn't ready to become a manager for major leagues.
Yeah,
he was like a sacrificial lamb type of situation.
Yeah, definitely. So I think we'll end off the final segment. Obviously, closing thoughts as well. What do you think the Mets should do? Should they sell, stand pat, or buy at the trade deadline? And what do you see for the coming end of this year and the future? So we'll start with Dan.
I'm going selling because we need the pitching prospects, and we need to figure out who we're going to get rid of and who we're actually going to build this team around to be that perennial playoff team, and hopefully, dare I say, make it to the World Series, and dare I say it again, win an actual World Series in our lifetimes. I was born in '87, so I have obviously we have never seen them win. So, yeah.
Right.
So sell, get some good prospects, and make sure you don't trade the wrong players away and have them kill us for the rest of the lifetime.
Wilmer Flores, Travis Darno, all the names. John, what do you have to say for your final thoughts? And where do you see the Mets? Where do you think the Mets should go after this year?
Sell, and sell. Have a fire sale. I got the before we go. I got some names here. You know, Billy Epler, if you're listening, here's some guys you could either target at the deadline or make an even bigger trade in the offseason. Here's some starters: Mitch Keller, Jordan Montgomery, Lucas Giolito, Blake Snell, all guys, and of course Shohei Ohtani. Great would be starters for us. Relievers: David Bednar, Jason Foley, Josh Hader, Adbert Alzolay, and Gregory Santos. Just some names out there. There's even pitching prospects I have down for you: Sixto Sanchez, Zach Kent, Landon Knack. Do something with this pitching.
There's a lot you could do. There's a lot you could do on the selling point. But obviously, this is going to conclude our Mets stream. We'd like to thank Dan for coming on, obviously.
For having me. I appreciate it. Hopefully the Mets have a better second half. Keep up the good work, guys. I really enjoy your work.
Thank you. We appreciate, brother. But, guys, we just want to say one thing before we head out of here. I just want to commemorate this Mets stream. This guy would have been the first guy I would have called for the Mets stream. We're obviously grateful to have Dan on. Our good buddy, Jeffrey Turner, I was at his memorial party yesterday, met his family, met everybody. They could be watching right now, could be not, but Jeffrey was a very happy Mets fan. He sadly passed away about a month or two ago.
Sorry to hear that.
Thank you. He was friends with all of us, a very good content creator in the Giants community, Big Blue Crew. So obviously we're talking about his favorite baseball team at the moment, very passionate about sports and all that. So obviously we dedicate this to him as he's very happy up in heaven that we're talking about his team. So guys, if you haven't already, hit the like button, subscribe, do all the good stuff. We'll be back sooner this week. I think Thursday is our next stream. We'll be doing Yankees first half edition stream. Once again, guys, hit the like button, subscribe, do all the good stuff. We thank Dan for coming on. I'm sure Alex put his Twitter in the
did.
chat.
Thank you.
Yep.
Follow the Twitter. He obviously part of NYGiantsRush for also check out his football content. But guys, we love but hate the Mets at the same time. Let's see if they have a better second half. We will all see you all later. Peace and have a good night.